The gun went off before Mia even understood what she was seeing. 1 second she was crouching behind a marble pillar, camera raised, lens focused on the dim corridor ahead. And the next, the sound cracked through the air like a whip, sharp and final, swallowed almost immediately by the distant pulse of gala music 2 floors below. She didn't scream. Her body wouldn't let her. Every muscle locked at once, and all she could do was press herself flat against the cold pillar and stop breathing. Before the story continues, if you're new to this channel, kindly subscribe to this YouTube channel, like the video, comment, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the conclusion of this story and more intense stories like this. Through the viewfinder she had seen it. All of it. The man in the gray suit crumpling to the floor. The 2 figures standing over him. One stepping back, one staying perfectly still. And that still figure, tall, dark-coated, unhurried in a way that made her stomach drop, had slowly turned his head. Not toward the body, not toward the door, toward her, directly toward her. Mia yanked herself behind the pillar. Her camera knocked against her chest. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could hear the lens cap rattling against the body of the camera like a tiny alarm going off just for her. She pressed both palms flat against the marble and forced herself to count. 1, 2, 3. Move. You have to move right now. She moved. She didn't run. Running would make noise, so she walked fast, shoulders hunched, weaving back through the service corridor the way she'd come, past the linen carts and the stacked trays and the staff, who didn't look twice at her because she had a pressed lanyard around her neck and a camera bag on her shoulder, and she looked like she belonged. She had spent years learning to look like she belonged in places that would have thrown her out otherwise. It was the only useful thing about being invisible. The stairwell door was 20 feet ahead. 15. 10. A hand closed around her arm. Not grabbing. Not violent. Just there. Firm and absolute, like a door swinging shut. She spun around with her heart in her throat and her free hand already balled into a fist, and she almost swung before she processed the face in front of her. He was younger than she expected. That was the first thing she thought, which was absurd given the circumstances. Sharp features, dark eyes that gave nothing away, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. He looked at her the way people looked at equations they were solving in their heads, calm, focused, and completely unbothered by her terror. "You were in the corridor," he said. His English was perfect. "Quiet." "I was looking for the bathroom," she said. Something moved behind his eyes. Not quite amusement. Closer to patience. The kind of patience that had never needed to rush because everything always waited for it. "Your camera," he said. "Give it to me." "Absolutely not." The 2 men flanking him, she hadn't even registered them until now, shifted slightly. A small movement. A warning written in body language. Mia's grip tightened on the camera strap. "I'm a photographer," she said, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. "I was hired to be here tonight. Whatever you think I saw." "You saw everything," he said. "And so did your camera." He tilted his head slightly. "I'm not going to hurt you." That is exactly what someone who was going to hurt me would say. This time something did move across his face. A fraction of a shift. She filed it away without knowing why. "What's your name?" he asked. She said nothing. "My name is Kang Jae-won," he said, as though that was supposed to mean something. And then she watched his expression change, just slightly, when he registered from her face that it didn't. Most people clearly reacted to that name. She hadn't. She watched him recalibrate in real time. "The men who were in that corridor with me tonight," he said carefully, "are not the only men here. There are 3 others on this floor right now who have already flagged your press lanyard on their system. They know what you look like. They know you were up here. And unlike me, they are not interested in talking." Mia's mouth went dry. "You have about 4 minutes before they reach this corridor," he continued. "You can try to leave on your own. I won't stop you." He held her gaze. "But you won't make it to the street." The music from downstairs pulsed up through the floor beneath her heels. Somewhere 2 floors below, 500 people in expensive clothing were drinking champagne and laughing and had absolutely no idea. The corridor felt very narrow suddenly. The stairwell door felt very far away. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Because you didn't ask to be here," he said. "And I don't punish people for bad timing." 3.5 minutes, she thought. Maybe less. "If I go with you," she said slowly. "And you're lying. If this is just a cleaner way to make me disappear, then you'll have made a mistake," he said. "But you'll have made it with time to fight back." Walk out that door alone and you won't get the chance. Mia looked at him. She looked at the stairwell door. She looked back at him. She hated that he was right. She hated it so much she could feel it in her back teeth. Fine, she said, but I'm keeping my camera. He glanced at it once. Then he nodded and turned, and his men fell into position around them without a word. And Mia followed Kang Jae-won down the corridor with her camera clutched to her chest and her heart slamming against her ribs, and the very clear understanding that her life had just split in two. The part before tonight, and whatever came after it. The black car was waiting at the side entrance. No plates. Of course there were no plates. Mia got in because there was nothing else to do, and the door closed behind her with the soft, definitive sound of something locking into place. He sat across from her in the dark interior and looked out the window as Seoul moved past them in blurs of neon and rain-slicked streets. He didn't speak. She didn't speak. She focused on controlling her breathing and not letting her hands shake visibly and memorizing the route in case she needed it later, which she probably would. After 4 minutes of silence, she said, "Are you going to tell me what I actually witnessed tonight?" He turned from the window, looked at her with those flat, unreadable eyes. "Yes," he said, "but not yet." "Why not yet?" "Because once I tell you," he said, "there's no version of tonight where you walk away unchanged. I'm giving you a few more minutes of not knowing." Mia stared at him. "That might be the most unsettling thing anyone has ever said to me," she said. "I know," he said, and looked back out the window. The penthouse was on the 43rd floor of a building that had no name on the outside, just a sleek black facade that reflected the city back at itself like a mirror that wanted nothing to do with what it saw. The elevator required a keycard and a code and what appeared to be a retinal scan, which Mia noted silently and filed under things that should have made her turn around, except she had no way to turn around anymore. The doors opened directly into the living space. It was enormous and cold and almost aggressively minimal, gray stone floors, floor-to-ceiling windows running the entire length of the room, furniture that looked expensive enough to have its own security detail. There were 4 men already inside when they arrived. They looked at Mia the way you look at a complication you didn't budget for. Jae-won said something in Korean. Short, flat, final. The men dispersed without a word. "Sit," he said to her. "I'd rather stand." He looked at her for a moment. Then he sat down himself, crossed one leg over the other, and folded his hands in his lap with the patience of someone who had never once in his life been told no and was still deciding how he felt about it. "The man you saw tonight," he began, "was named Park Sung-il. He worked for me for 6 years. For the last 8 months, he had been feeding operational information to a group called the Daewha faction, our primary rivals. Tonight was not the first time he betrayed someone in that corridor. It was simply the last." Mia sat down, not because he'd told her to, because her legs decided for her. "So I witnessed an execution," she said. "You witnessed a consequence," he said. "I'm going to need you to understand that those are the same thing to me." Something shifted in his jaw. "Fair," he said quietly. "And the Daewha faction," she said. "They know I was there. They had people at the gala." "Yes. Your face is already in their system." He paused. "As is your name." "Mia Calloway. Chicago. Freelance photographer. You flew in 4 days ago on assignment. You live alone. You are currently 4 months behind on rent." The blood drained from her face. "You looked me up. In the car," he said simply. "I needed to know who I was bringing here." "And what did you decide?" she asked. "About who I am." He looked at her steadily. "That you're someone who was in the wrong place through no fault of her own. And that the people now looking for you will not care about that distinction." Mia pressed her fingers together in her lap. Outside the windows, Seoul burned and glittered 43 floors below, indifferent and enormous, and she felt the full weight of how far she was from anything familiar. She thought about her apartment, her camera bag hanging on the door, the half-eaten bowl of ramen she'd left on the counter before the cab to the gala. Small, ordinary things that felt very far away now. "What happens to me?" she asked. "You stay here," he said, "until we've neutralized the threat. Then you go home." "How long?" "A few days. Maybe less. And I'm supposed to just trust that." "No," he said. "You're supposed to be practical about it. Trust is a different conversation." She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them looked away for longer than was comfortable, and then Mia broke first because she was tired and scared, and she was not going to let him see either of those things any more than she already had. "I want to call someone," she said, "to let them know I'm okay." "Not yet." That wasn't a request. I know, he said. The answer is still no. Any contact you make right now creates a trail. If they find who you called, they will use that person to get to you. One day, then you can call. She wanted to argue. She turned it over and found she couldn't find a hole in the logic, which made her angrier than the answer itself. A woman appeared from a side hallway, mid-40s, efficient, the kind of face that had seen everything and was done being surprised by any of it. She said something to Jae-won in Korean, and he nodded, and she turned to Mia and said in clean, precise English, "I'll show you to your room. There are clothes. Bathroom is private. If you need anything, knock twice on the left wall, and someone will come." "Am I locked in?" Mia asked. The woman glanced at Jae-won. "No," he said from across the room. "But the elevator needs my code. And there are men in the lobby and on this floor. So practically speaking, I'm locked in," Mia said. "Practically speaking," he agreed, without apology. Mia picked up her camera bag, slung it over her shoulder, and followed the woman down the hall. The room was gray and clean and had a window that looked out over a different angle of the city. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her camera, and then she took the memory card out and held it in her palm. Tiny, plastic, carrying everything she'd seen tonight in whatever invisible language photographs spoke before they became images. She should give it to him. She knew that. It would make her less valuable as a target and potentially more valuable as someone he had reason to keep safe. That was the logical move. She put it back in the camera. She wasn't ready to give up the only leverage she had. She lay back on the bed without taking her shoes off and stared at the ceiling and listened to the muffled sounds of the penthouse. Low voices in Korean, footsteps, the occasional door. She cataloged everything. She had always done that. It was the photographer in her. Notice. File. Remember. The world was always telling you things if you paid close enough attention. She was still paying attention at 2 in the morning when she finally fell asleep without meaning to, camera bag tucked under her arm like a lifeline. She woke at 6 to gray morning light and the immediate crushing memory of where she was. She lay still for 30 seconds. Then she got up, washed her face, changed into the clothes that had been left, plain, dark, her size exactly, which was somehow more unnerving than if they'd been wrong, and she thought about the layout she'd memorized on the way in. Elevator out. Men on the floor. Lobby covered. Stairs. She had noticed a fire exit door at the far end of the hallway. No keycard panel on it. Emergency release only. She didn't know what triggered the alarm or whether it was even connected to anything in a building this private and this deliberately off-grid. But she knew she couldn't just sit in a gray room waiting for a man she didn't trust to tell her she was allowed to leave. She needed to know if she could leave. That was different from actually leaving. She needed to know the option existed. She cracked her door open. The hallway was empty. Early morning quiet. She moved quickly and quietly in the way she had learned to move through spaces she wasn't supposed to be in. Low, fast, unhesitating. She reached the fire exit door. Pushed the bar. Cold air hit her. Concrete stairs spiraling down. No alarm. She almost laughed with relief. She took 3 steps down. "I wouldn't," said a voice from above her. She looked up. Jae-won was leaning against the door frame at the top of the stairs, arms folded, still in last night's shirt with the collar open, looking like he hadn't slept either. He didn't look angry. He looked like he'd expected this at exactly this time and had simply waited for it. "There are 2 men at the bottom of these stairs," he said. "And the building exits onto a street that Daewoo has had under surveillance since 4 this morning." He tilted his head. "You move quietly. I'll give you that." Mia stood on the cold concrete stairs and looked up at him and felt the specific humiliation of having been outsmarted before breakfast. "Come inside," he said. Not unkind. "I'll have food brought. We need to talk about what happens next." She climbed back up the stairs, walked past him into the warmth of the hallway. She didn't look at him, but she felt him fall into step slightly behind her, and she said without turning around, "Did you sleep at all?" A pause. "No," he said. She didn't say anything to that, but something about the honesty of it, the plainness of it, from a man who seemed to perform nothing, stayed with her longer than she expected it to. They ate at opposite ends of a long table that was clearly designed for meetings, not meals. Someone had placed 2 plates of food in the center. Rice, soup, something that smelled warm and uncomplicated. And Mia ate because she was hungry and refusing food out of principle was the kind of stubbornness that only worked when you weren't starving. Jae-won ate slowly and without looking at his food, reading something on a tablet propped against the table edge, scrolling occasionally with one finger. It was the most aggressively normal thing she had seen him do, and it irritated her that it made him seem more human. "You said we needed to talk," she said. He set the tablet face down, gave her his full attention in that way he had, complete, immediate, like a light switching on, that she was already learning to brace for. "The Daewoo faction has made contact," he said. "This morning. They know you're here." Mia's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "How?" "We have a leak," he said. The words were flat, but something underneath them wasn't. A tightness. Controlled anger pressed down behind glass. "Someone on my team communicated your location. We don't know who yet. So I'm not even safe here." "You're safer here than anywhere else," he said. "But no, not completely safe." "No." Mia set her spoon down, pushed the bowl slightly away, looked at him across the long, empty stretch of table between them, and said, "I need you to be completely honest with me right now. Not managed. Not calculated. Actually honest." He watched her. "How much danger am I in?" she asked. "On a scale of inconvenience to I should be genuinely terrified." A long pause. Outside the windows, the morning city moved and hummed, indifferent as always. "Closer to the second one," he said. She nodded slowly. She had known. She had needed to hear it said plainly anyway, because plain things were easier to build a response to than things wrapped in careful language. "Okay," she said. "Then tell me everything. Not the version you think I can handle. Everything." Something crossed his face. Respect, maybe, or something adjacent to it. He told her. The Daewoo faction had been operating in Seoul for 11 years. They controlled supply chains, politicians, a significant portion of the financial architecture that moved money through 3 countries without leaving fingerprints. Jae-won had been systematically dismantling them from the inside for 4 years, using people placed inside their organization, cutting supply lines, pulling threads until the whole thing would eventually unravel. Park Sung-il, the man who died in the corridor, had been feeding Daewoo information about Jae-won's operation for months. Last night was the culmination of a very long and careful investigation, and Mia had photographed all of it. "They don't just want the photos," Jae-won said. "They want leverage. Over me. You being here, being under my protection, gives them a pressure point they didn't have before." "Because you chose to protect me," she said. "Yes. Which means I'm not just a witness anymore. I'm a liability to you." "Yes." She looked at him. "Then why not just hand me over? Cut the liability." The silence that followed was different from his other silences. Heavier. More personal. "Because that's not something I do," he said. "People who run operations like yours make pragmatic decisions all the time," she said. "I've been here less than 12 hours. You don't know me. Handing me over would solve your problem." "It would create a different one," he said. "What kind?" He looked at her directly. "The kind I'd have to live with." Mia held his gaze. She was looking for the performance in it, the calculated humanity, the strategic warmth designed to make her compliant and cooperative. She looked carefully and she couldn't find it. What she found instead was something quieter and less comfortable. Something that looked like it meant what it said. She picked her spoon back up, started eating again. "Tell me about Daewoo's next move," she said. And just like that, they were working together. Not because either of them decided to. Because the situation decided for them, and they were both practical enough to follow the logic wherever it went. They spent 2 hours at that table. Jae-won walked her through the faction structure, the key players, the pressure points his team was already pushing on. Mia listened and asked questions. Good ones, sharp ones, the kind that made his answers work harder. And he noticed. She could see him noticing. She was used to being underestimated in rooms like this, and she had learned to treat that as a tool. She paid attention to everything and let people assume she wasn't. At one point, she asked about a name he mentioned in passing, a financier connected to 3 of Daewoo's primary accounts, and Jae-won stopped and looked at her and said, "How did you catch that?" "I mentioned it once. I remember things I hear," she said simply. "Comes from years of working alone. No one to ask twice." He looked at her for a moment longer than the conversation required. Then he moved on. But something had shifted in the room, and they both felt it, and neither of them mentioned it. By mid-morning, his team had narrowed the leak to 2 possible sources inside the organization. Jae-won called a meeting in a side room, and Mia was not invited. which she accepted without argument because she understood the boundaries of what was hers to be involved in and what wasn't. She took her camera to the window instead and sat cross-legged on the wide stone sill and looked out over Seoul. She had been to a lot of cities for work. She had a way of seeing them through a lens first and experiencing them second, which her last boyfriend had said made her emotionally unavailable and which she had privately thought was just the wrong way to frame paying attention. Seoul from 43 floors up looked like a machine that had decided to also be beautiful. All geometry and light, and the kind of density that felt intentional rather than accidental. She raised her camera, shot the skyline without thinking about it, then lowered the camera and looked at the image on the small screen and felt something pull in her chest that had nothing to do with the city. She scrolled back, found the photographs from last night. There it was, the corridor, the two figures, the gray-suited man mid-fall, the terrible stillness of the scene. And in the center of the frame, partially obscured by shadow, Jae-won's face in three-quarter profile. Unposed, unguarded. In the split second before he'd registered her lens he had looked, she searched for the word, tired. Not physically. Tired in the way of someone who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has simply gotten so used to the weight they've stopped noticing it sits on them. She stared at the photograph for a long time. Then she heard the side room door open and she lowered the camera and looked away from the screen before he came back into the room. He sat down across from her. He had his sleeves rolled up now. She hadn't seen him without the jacket before, and there was something about the plainness of it that made him seem less like a symbol and more like a person. "The leak has been identified," he said. "It's being handled." "Is handling it something I want the details of?" she asked. "Probably not," he said. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "You're remarkably calm for someone in your situation." "I'm not calm," she said. "I'm compartmentalizing." "There's a difference. Calm means you're okay with what's happening. Compartmentalizing means you've locked the panic in a room and you're functioning around it." "And when does the panic get out of the room?" "When I'm somewhere safe enough to let it," she said. Something moved across his face at that. Quiet and unannounced, gone before she could fully read it. "Tell me something," she said. "And you don't have to if it's none of my business, but the photograph on your desk in the side room. The woman. Who is she?" The stillness that moved through him was different from his usual stillness. This one had texture. "Wait. My mother," he said. "She looks kind." "She was," he said. Mia heard the past tense and didn't push. She had learned long ago that the most important thing you could do when someone handed you a small, painful truth was not to pull on it. "I'm sorry," she said simply. He looked at her for a moment as though the words were in a language he recognized, but rarely heard spoken to him directly. "She would have found you interesting," he said quietly. She liked people who paid attention. It was possibly the most personal thing he had said since she met him. She could see from the slight change in his expression that he knew it too. He stood up, rolled his sleeve down, reached for his jacket. "The situation is stabilizing," he said, "back to business, back behind the glass. You should be able to leave within 48 hours. "Good," she said. "Good," he said. Neither of them sounded particularly convincing. That evening, one of his men, young, nervous, clearly not used to having civilians around, brought her food and stayed a beat too long in the doorway, and then said, in careful English, "Mr. Kang. He doesn't usually," and then stopped himself. "Doesn't usually what?" Mia asked. The young man looked conflicted. Then he said quietly, "He doesn't usually explain things to people. He just decides. But with you he explains. We all noticed." He left before she could respond. Mia sat with that for a long time. Outside the window, Seoul moved into evening, lights coming on one by one across the skyline, the city shifting from its daytime self into something slower and more honest. She thought about the photograph on her camera, the tiredness in his face that he didn't know she'd captured. She thought about the way he'd said she would have found you interesting, not as a compliment designed to produce an effect, but as a plain small truth that had escaped before he could decide whether to release it. She was in serious trouble, she thought, and it had nothing to do with the Daewoo faction. The attack came at 3 a.m. Not loud. That was the thing nobody told you about real danger. It didn't announce itself with drama. It came quietly, a soft pop somewhere below, the low murmur of voices in the hallway shifting in pitch. Then Jae-won's door opening and closing fast and footsteps moving with controlled urgency across the stone floor, and Mia was already sitting up in bed before anyone knocked on her door, because she had been sleeping lightly and her body had registered the change in the atmosphere of the building before her mind caught up. The knock came anyway. 2 sharp raps. She opened the door. Jae-won was standing in the hallway in a dark jacket, phone in hand, 2 men flanking him. His face was the same as always, composed, unreadable, but his eyes were different. Alert in a way she hadn't seen before. Like something behind them had been switched on. "We need to move," he said. "Where?" "Safe house. 30 minutes from here. The building has been compromised." "The second leak," she said. His jaw tightened. "Get your camera. Nothing else. Let's go." She grabbed the camera bag. That was it. She had stopped thinking of the clothes and the toiletries as hers anyway. She followed him into the hallway, and they moved fast, not running but close to it, toward the fire exit she had tried to use that morning, which felt like a week ago now. "I thought the stairs weren't safe," she said, keeping her voice low. "They weren't this morning," he said. "We cleared them 20 minutes ago when the threat came in. There's a car in the basement." He glanced at her sideways as they moved. "Stay close. Don't stop for anything. If we get separated." "We won't," she said. He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Then he pushed the fire door open and they went through. They made it to the second floor landing before everything went wrong. 3 men came up from below, fast and deliberate, moving with the efficiency of people who had done this kind of thing many times before. Jae-won's 2 men stepped forward immediately, and what followed was loud and fast and terrifying, and Mia pressed herself against the concrete wall and did not freeze because freezing was a luxury she couldn't afford. She looked at the layout of the stairwell. She looked at the door to her left, second floor, presumably the building's office levels, empty at this hour. She looked at the gap in the chaos between the bodies. She moved through the door, into the dark corridor beyond. She heard Jae-won say her name, sharp, urgent, and then the door swung shut behind her, and she was alone in a dark hallway that smelled like carpet cleaner and recycled air, and she was running before she had a plan because a direction was better than standing still. She found a room with a window that looked onto a side alley. Second floor. Survivable drop if she had to. She pressed herself beside the window frame and looked down and counted and thought and made herself breathe. She had her camera bag. She had her phone, which Jae-won's people had given back to her that afternoon on the condition she didn't contact anyone. And she had the memory card that had started all of this, still tucked inside the camera where she'd kept it since the beginning. She looked at her phone. 1 bar of signal. She thought about calling someone. Anyone. But Jae-won's voice came back to her. Any contact you make creates a trail. And she understood now in a way she hadn't that first night that this wasn't control for the sake of control. It was architecture. Everything he did was architecture, built to protect something or someone even when it didn't look like it from the outside. She heard the corridor door open. She spun around with her back to the window and her camera bag raised like the world's least effective weapon, and then a figure stepped through the dark and she nearly collapsed with relief because it was Jae-won, breathing harder than she had ever seen him breathe, jacket torn at the shoulder, blood on his hand that she immediately looked at and then looked at his face. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No," he said. "Not mine." He crossed the room in 4 strides and his hands came up and framed her face, and he looked at her with an intensity that she felt in her chest like a struck chord, checking her, cataloging her. Every inch of his focus narrowed to the singular question of whether she was okay. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. His hand stayed on her face for 2 seconds longer than the question required. Then he dropped them and stepped back, and she watched him rebuild the composure in real time. A visible thing, like watching someone button a coat. And when he spoke again, his voice was level. "We have to keep moving," he said. "My men dealt with the 3 on the stairs. There are more in the lobby. There's a maintenance exit 2 corridors from here that they haven't reached yet." "Okay," she said. "You ran," he said, and there was something in his voice she couldn't read. Not anger. Not quite. "I found an exit point and a defensible position," she said. "I wasn't running away. I was relocating." He looked at her. Something that was almost a smile moved across his face and disappeared so fast she would have missed it if she hadn't been paying the exact kind of attention she was always paying. "Let's go," he said. The maintenance exit led to an alley that led to a street where a car was already waiting. A different car, smaller, unmarked, a driver she hadn't seen before. They got in, and the city swallowed them, and Mia sat in the dark interior and let herself shake for exactly 60 seconds because she had earned it, and then she stopped. Jae-won was on his phone, speaking in rapid Korean, low and controlled. She watched his profile in the passing city light, the sharp line of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders that he carried like permanent architecture, and she thought about his hands on her face and the way he'd looked at her, and she thought about what his staff member had said that evening. Asterisk, he doesn't usually explain things to people. We all noticed. Asterisk. The safe house was 40 minutes away in the end, not 30. A low building in a quieter district. Nothing remarkable about it from the outside. Inside it was sparse and functional, and had the feel of a place that existed purely to be useful. They were met by 3 of his people, the woman from the penthouse among them, unruffled as always. And there was a rapid exchange in Korean that Mia didn't follow but read entirely from body language. Then everyone dispersed to their tasks, and it was just the 2 of them in a small room with a table and 2 chairs and the specific, exhausted silence of people who have been through something together and haven't yet decided what to do with that fact. "Sit down," she said to him this time. He looked at her. "You've been standing for 4 hours," she said. "Sit down." He sat. She sat across from him. She reached into her camera bag and took out the memory card and put it on the table between them. He looked at it, looked at her. "You kept it," he said. "It was leverage," she said. "I needed leverage. I don't need it anymore." He picked it up slowly, turned it over in his fingers, looked at it the way people look at things they understand the full weight of. "This could have gotten you out of this," he said. "You could have traded it to Daewoo, bought yourself a way home." "I know," she said. "Why didn't you?" She looked at him directly. "Because you didn't hand me over when it would have been easier to. I don't trade away people who choose the harder thing." The silence that followed was long and warm and entirely different from every silence that had come before it. He looked at her across the small table in the sparse safe house room, and she looked back, and neither of them looked away, and this time neither of them broke it. "The faction is finished," he said finally, quietly. "Tonight forced their hand too early. They've exposed their entire network trying to get to you. My team has everything they need now. It's over. So I can go home," she said. "Yes," he said. "Tomorrow. I'll arrange everything." "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. Neither of them moved. "I took a photograph of you," she said. "Last night at the gala. Before you saw me. I didn't plan it." She paused. "You look tired. Not the way people look when they haven't slept. The other kind." He was very still. "I've been doing this for 4 years," he said slowly. "Trying to end something that should never have been mine to end. And some days," he stopped. Started again. "Some days the weight of it is just very present." "I know that kind," she said softly. He looked at her. "What are you carrying?" She thought about her apartment, her debt, the career she loved that never quite loved her back enough to pay her rent, the years of being invisible in rooms and deciding to call it a skill instead of a wound. "Smaller things than you," she said. "But mine." He nodded. He understood that. She could see he understood it completely. "The photograph," he said. "The one you took. Of me. I'll delete it," she said. "If you want." A long pause. "No," he said quietly. "Keep it." At the airport the next afternoon the sun was doing something generous with the Seoul skyline, and Mia stood at the departure's entrance with her camera bag and a plane ticket that Jae-won's people had arranged in 48 hours of her life that had rearranged everything quietly and permanently. He was there. She hadn't expected him to come. He stood a few feet away in a plain dark coat looking like himself, composed, contained, present in that total way he had, and he said, "I don't do this. Come to airports." "I know," she said. "I wanted to," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Everything she could have said lined up behind her teeth, and she let most of it stay there, because some things were too new and too real to put language to yet. "Thank you," she said, "for the harder thing." Something broke open very quietly in his expression. Not dramatically, just open, like a window. "You were never just a witness to me," he said. "I want you to know that." "I know," she said. "That's why leaving is hard." She picked up her bag, walked through the departure's door. She did not let herself look back, because if she looked back she would not get on the plane, and she needed to get on the plane. She needed to go home and breathe, and let the 60 seconds of shaking she'd been holding back for 2 days finally happen somewhere quiet and safe. She found her seat, stowed her bag, pressed her head back against the headrest, and closed her eyes. When she opened them and reached for her camera bag to stow it properly under the seat, her hand found something that hadn't been there before. A small envelope tucked into the front pocket. She opened it. Inside was a card. No name, no signature, just a phone number and 4 words in handwriting that was precise and measured and entirely characteristic of its author. "Seoul will miss you." Mia read it twice. Then she looked out the window at the tarmac and the distant city skyline, and she thought about tired eyes and small plain truths escaping before they could be stopped and hands that had framed her face like something worth protecting. She opened her phone. She pulled up the airline app. She booked a return flight for 2 weeks from today. Then she put her phone away, settled back into her seat, and for the first time in 48 hours she smiled. Really smiled. And let herself feel the full and terrifying and completely inconvenient truth that somewhere between a marble pillar and a safe house and a table with 2 chairs, something had begun that neither of them had planned for. And neither of them, she suspected, was going to run from it. To enjoy more stories, kindly subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, comment, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more intense stories like this.